Now at 10 o'clock, the news here on BBC One with Fiona Bruce.
A challenge to the Labour leader, a former shadow cabinet minister, will stand against Jeremy Corbyn tomorrow. Attending a rally of supporters this evening, Mr Corbyn defies the growing numbers calling on him to stand down. But the BBC understands Angela Eagle, formerly Shadow Business Secretary, will now formally challenge him for the leadership. In the Commons, the Prime Minister adds his voice to those calling on the Labour leader to quit.
It might be in my party's interest for him to sit there. It's not in the national interest, and I would say, for heaven's sake, man, go!
But this evening, the unions give their backing to Mr Corbyn. For now. Also tonight. And then there were 27 EU leaders meet without Britain, but with a tough message about any future deal with Europe. The Istanbul airport attack, the moment one of the gunmen fell wounded to the floor, his gun sliding away from him just before he detonated his suicide belt. Remembering the Battle of the Somme 100 years on and the bloodiest day in British military history. And what happened when the British player ranked 772nd took on the great Roger Federer on Wimbledon Centre Court?
And coming up in Sports Day on BBC News, find out if England successfully chased down 308 in just 42 overs to win the rain-interrupted fourth one-day international against Sri Lanka.
Good evening. After days of pressure, including a vote of no confidence and over 40 shadow cabinet resignations, Labour's Jeremy Corbyn is to face a leadership challenge. The BBC has been told that the former shadow business secretary, Angela Eagle, will announce she's standing against him tomorrow. Mr Corbyn faced more calls to resign today from his own deputy, from the former Labour leader, Ed Miliband, and, highly unusually, from the Prime Minister. This evening, Mr Corbyn attended a rally of his supporters and insisted he would carry on. Our Deputy Political Editor, John Pienaar, has the latest.
And off to work he goes. This is as calm as it gets for Jeremy Corbyn just now. Pushed about, everyone asking when he'll give up and go.
Good morning, everybody. Nice to see you all.
But there's nothing good about the Labour leader's day to day or any day. It just keeps getting worse. There's a Polish centre to visit with Tom Watson. Everyone already knew his deputy wanted him to quit, but he was doing business as usual, today condemning hate crime.
We as a society will prosecute those people that commit hate crimes.
OK, Jeremy, thanks so much. We've got to go over this way. Thanks so much. Come over this way.
Just time for that brief, decent sentiment before he's suddenly hauled off by his staff before reporters can ask about his struggling leadership. Later, Tom Watson went public. He wouldn't challenge for the leadership, but Mr Corbyn had to go.
My party is in peril. We are facing an existential crisis. And I just don't want us to be in this position because I think there are millions of people in the country who need a left-leaning government who can give people opportunity. And right now we're not doing that.
Morning. There is a challenge awaiting. Angela Eagle, who joined the mass resignation of shadow cabinet ministers, will declare her candidacy tomorrow. A left-leaning heavyweight who believes she can peel off Labour members who've lost faith in their leader.
This is heading for a bigger landslide than 1945. They are going down like 9 pins.
Angela Eagle's offering herself as an experienced hand. She was elected in 1992 and one capable of reuniting the party. She served as minister under John Prescott and Gordon Brown, and then in the shadow cabinet until she joined the coup intended to bring down Jeremy Corbyn. She's one of the first women MPs to come out as gay, twin sister to Maria Eagle, who also resigned, and popular, though not with Team Corbyn tonight. For Jeremy Corbyn, it's been a bad day at the office. He's never faced demands to quit from so high up or been such a laughingstock just for turning up in the Commons.
Jeremy Corbyn.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Prime Minister has 2 months left. Will he leave a one-nation legacy?
He talks about job insecurity and my 2 months to go. It might be in my party's interest for him to sit there. It's not in the national interest, and I would say, for heaven's sake, man, go!
That must have hurt, but it got worse when his own past leader, never an open critic till now, piled in too.
I have come to the conclusion very reluctantly that Jeremy Corbyn's position is untenable. This is a time of acute national crisis. People from all wings of the party in Parliament have lost confidence in Jeremy, so sadly I believe he has to go.
Some of your colleagues seem genuinely afraid that this civil war, which is now underway, could end in the Labour Party being broken irreparably. Do you share that fear?
Look, I think there's huge risks to the Labour Party, obviously, of the divisions that we see.
Such as what?
But I care more about the risks to the country. You know, there is a vacuum of leadership in the country at the moment. People, the public, I think will look very, very badly on us if we carry on with a leader that doesn't have the support of most of the parliamentary party and we just have division.
Trade union support is crucial to Mr Corbyn, and tonight 4 big unions called a challenge unnecessary, but also said MPs should unite around whoever won. Tonight, at a pro-Corbyn rally, his Chief Lieutenant, Shadow Chancellor John McDonnell, was getting the campaign started early.
I'm not going to give up that hope of a socialist society built in this country or be bullied out of it by a group of Labour MPs who refuse to accept democracy in our party.
For Mr Corbyn, evidence, as if it was needed, of the deep divisions in the party.
Any of those things.
What about Europe, Jeremy? What about Europe? Where were you when we needed you?
It's just the start. This battle for the party's leadership and its future will be truly painful for Labour in the weeks ahead, once again. It's just the start. The battle for the party's leadership and its future will be truly painful for Labour in the weeks ahead and long afterwards.
John Pinar reporting there. Well, the Conservative leadership battle is also underway. The Work and Pension Secretary, Stephen Crabb, has become the first to confirm that he will stand for party leader and for Prime Minister. He was followed by the former Defence Secretary, Liam Fox. Boris Johnson and Home Secretary Theresa May are also expected to confirm they'll join the race. Nominations close at midday tomorrow. Our political editor, Laura Koonsberg, has more.
Politics is being pulled apart before our eyes. But who will rebuild? This afternoon, the rules of the contest to be the next Prime Minister have been decided. But it's Tory MPs, then party members, who'll choose who'll be in charge.
Morning.
The favourite, the biggest winner of last week, Boris Johnson, who can always pull a crowd. But in a moment of crisis, is a politician who's sometimes accused of cartoonish behaviour the right choice?
I think Boris Johnson has the ability to reach out to people. He won Mayor of London twice. He secured a massive mandate as part of the Leave campaign. And I think over the coming months, we need to talk about all the other policies that we want to deliver.
Looking increasingly cheery, his main rival, the Home Secretary Theresa May. MPs say her serious style is picking up support.
I want somebody who's got a clear track record of leadership, of making decisions and delivering at the very top level. And somebody who's got a record of delivering on that. And Theresa May has absolutely got that for me. And she's got that focus and determination and the sincerity that I want to see in a Prime Minister.
Enter the first candidate to launch openly. Stephen Crabb, now in charge at Work and Pensions.
I was brought up to understand that nothing gets handed to you on a plate. On the rainy rugby fields of West Wales, I learnt that it's not a question of waiting for the ball to pop out of the back of the scrum. If you want it, you do what's required and you get your hands on it.
From a different generation and a different background to the other candidates. He says he'd get back control of immigration and have close trading relationships with the rest of the EU. But he put together a cross-party group to work out the detail.
Do you really think that members of the Tory party and then members of the public will be looking to someone who, with respect, has been in the cabinet for 2 years to move into number 10?
So there isn't anyone around the cabinet table at the moment who's got the full range of experience to be able to deal with the unique set of problems in front of it. And nobody's got a playbook or a manual with all of the clear instructions that we should be taking. We are in uncharted waters. But that is why you need somebody with the right values, the right sense of the need for national unity.
Isn't the truth you're putting a marker down for the next time round?
I don't necessarily see it that way. Look, when Margaret Thatcher ran to lead the Conservative Party, she'd only been in the cabinet 2 years as Education Secretary. David Cameron had never been in the Cabinet. Yes, I'm one of the younger ones around the Cabinet table, but that's no bad thing in an age when we're actually having to think about issues of intergenerational fairness, to reconnect with those people, frankly, up and down our country who look at all of us in Westminster now and they don't believe a single word that any of us say.
Anyone else who wants the most important seat at this table has to confirm their bid tomorrow. But in the end, it will be Tory party members, not the rest of us, to choose who they believe. Laura Kunsberg, BBC News, Westminster.
Let's talk to our Deputy Political Editor, John Pienaar, who's at Westminster. John, I can't recall a time when there have been two leadership contests in the two main parties at the same time. Let's talk about the Conservative one first. And an email has surfaced which sheds some light on the situation with Boris Johnson and Michael Gove.
Well, that's right. I mean, Boris Johnson starts the race way ahead, arguably, on charisma and popular appeal. And his launch tomorrow will be an optimistic vision of Britain's future. But Boris Johnson's vulnerabilities and weaknesses are discussed behind the scenes in the Tory party, and it's possible they could rather dog him through the campaign. Now, you'll recall that he teamed up with Michael Gove, his cabinet colleague, when they both joined the Leave campaign. And an email, as you say, has emerged, written by Michael Gove's wife, Sarah Vine, in which she warns her husband to get a clear promise of a job from Boris Johnson early on, which suggests rather a lack of trust. And she also suggests that the media moguls, Rupert Murdoch and Paul Dacre, instinctively dislike Boris Johnson. Now, Theresa May, the Home Secretary, she'll be starting the race as well tomorrow. She's likely to contrast her experience at the top level of government with Boris Johnson. She'll be the candidate of the safe pair of hands, which could rather suggest that Boris Johnson is more show than substance. So this contest, it's quite easy to imagine, could become rather personal and even quite nasty from the start.
And then, John, a challenge to the Labour leader tomorrow. Jeremy Corbyn insists that he can stay on. Can he?
Well, he says he's going to hang on in there, and as we start this contest, because we do start the contest tomorrow, it's going to be a very, very bloody affair. The thing you hear most from Labour MPs is that it's an existential contest, and they mean by that it will tear the Labour Party apart. That's a given. But also that they may not be able to put the parts back together afterwards, that we could see a split on the lines of the physical tear that took place in the 1980s, only worse and more permanent. Angela Eagle, she'll join the contest, but there are others behind her, like Owen Smith, who was in the shadow cabinet and resigned as well, and even Yvette Cooper, who was also a former Labour minister, who rather fancy their chances too. It will be, in its way, maybe more brutal than the Tory contest, but I guess these are ambitious figures too, and they seem quite keen to join in the race.
We shall see. John Pienaar at Westminster, thank you. Let's take a brief look at some of the day's other news stories. And there have been signs of recovery in the markets today as the FTSE 100 regained all the ground it lost in the wake of the vote to leave the European Union. The share index closed up 3.6% after a flurry of last-minute trading. The pound is also up against the US dollar, but remains well below levels reached before the referendum. One of the Home Office's top civil servants, Oliver Robbins, has been appointed to run the new unit which will oversee Britain's exit from the EU. The unit, which will be part of the Cabinet Office, will provide facts and options to help the next Prime Minister negotiate a new deal with Europe. The French Interior Minister has said that the vote to leave the EU will not affect the border agreement between France and Britain. The Le Touquet Accord keeps British border checks and many migrants on the French side of the Channel at Calais. Some French politicians had called for it to be scrapped. There was an uncompromising message from Brussels today as 27 European Union leaders wrapped up their summit for the first time in over 40 years without the presence of the British Prime Minister. They warned the UK that it will have to accept the free movement of people, in other words, unlimited immigration from the EU, if it still wants access to the single market. The President of the European Council, Donald Tusk, said Britain couldn't have an à la carte approach. From Brussels, our Europe editor, Katja Adler, reports.
France, yes. Germany, yes. The Netherlands, yes. But no British Prime Minister stepped out of a shiny black car to attend this EU summit. The UK was locked out today for the first time in 40 years. A glaring absence, matched here by a definite sense of defiance.
I think it's not about him today. Today is about us.
By him, she meant David Cameron. By us, she meant the other EU leaders. But the referendum he called was their focus of debate here today. How to deal with the Brexit process, how to heal the EU with an intentional show of unity after the UK voted out and the fear other countries could follow. When it came to talks of future trade deals with the UK, EU leaders were clearly in sync. One by one, they ruled out the possibility that Britain could have good access to the single market and stop EU migration.
There will be no single market à la carte.
President Juncker, will the UK find an accord with the EU outside the EU?
But it depends on negotiations. There will be no negotiations without notification.
No negotiation without notification, he said. The EU wants the UK to trigger formal Brexit talks with them as soon as possible. Of course, when EU leaders insist there'll be no flexibility on a UK deal now, that doesn't mean there won't be flexibility in the future. After all, Brussels is known as the capital of compromise. The truth is, no one knows. Not the leaders, not these journalists. No country has ever left the EU before. Plots, plans and rumours fly around, but certain is only this. The UK has voted to leave. The EU is keen to turn the page. Katya Adler, BBC News, Brussels.
Scotland's First Minister Nicola Sturgeon's hopes of winning support for her attempt to keep Scotland in the EU have been dealt a blow. The President of the European Commission, Jean-Claude Juncker, said that, and the Prime Minister of Spain both said the EU could only negotiate with the UK government. But after a day of talks with European officials, Ms Sturgeon said doors were open and she'd been met with a very sympathetic response. Our Scotland editor Sarah Smith reports from Brussels.
Hi. Nicola Sturgeon looks like a woman ready to stride onto the world stage.
I don't know how.
Meeting the President of the European Commission as part of her campaign to try to keep Scotland inside the EU. That will take a lot more than just smiles and kisses. The First Minister dashed from meeting to meeting, telling everyone Scotland wants to stay and should not be forced out. I asked her if she really expects some kind of special deal for Scotland.
Scotland voted to stay in the EU. I've got a duty to try to deliver that, and I've got a duty at this stage to explore all possible options to do so.
And do you still think it's highly likely there might be a second referendum on independence?
Yes, I do. Because I think while all options are on the table, I do think that it is highly likely that we will reach a point where the only option for Scotland, if we want to retain our membership of the EU, is to do that as an independent member state.
He doesn't want to talk to Scotland until then. The Spanish Prime Minister, worried about separatist movements in his own country, says the EU should negotiate only with the UK and not be talking to Scotland at all.
I am extremely against it, the treaties are extremely against it, and I believe everyone is extremely against it. So if the United Kingdom leaves the European Union, Scotland leaves too.
Nicola Sturgeon says she was not surprised by that Spanish hostility as she walked and talked her way around the corridors of power. But even sympathetic politicians can't see how Scotland can cut a separate deal if it's not a separate country.
Scotland is part of the United Kingdom. What will happen in the United Kingdom has to be decided in Scotland, in Edinburgh and together with London.
It's no secret that what Nicola Sturgeon really wants is for Scotland to join the European Union as an independent sovereign nation. So her mission here today can't really fail. If she can secure a special deal for Scotland ultimately, she comes out a winner. If she can't, well, she can always hold another referendum on Scottish independence. Either way, it looks good. And Miss Sturgeon is seen to be fighting for Scotland's interests, even if she can't claim to have actually won any concessions today. Sarah Smith, BBC News, Brussels.
At least 41 people are now known to have been killed in yesterday's gun and bomb attack on Istanbul's international airport. More than 200 others were wounded when 3 suicide bombers opened fire with automatic weapons before blowing themselves up at a security checkpoint at the entrance to the terminal building. Turkish officials say they believe so-called Islamic State was behind the attack, though they've not claimed responsibility. From Istanbul, our Turkey correspondent Mark Lowen reports.
Europe's third busiest airport, late evening. Panic.
Passengers rush through Istanbul's international terminal. 3 gunmen are on the loose. Suddenly, one blows himself up. Here, an attacker is caught by CCTV, floored by shots from a Turkish policeman. Wounded, he drops his rifle and it slides across the floor. The policeman approaches him, then spots his suicide belt and runs, just before the gunman detonates the device. Dozens were killed, many more wounded, taken to nearby hospitals. A coordinated attack on one of the world's busiest hubs with devastating impact.
So as it came out, we really saw the full extent of it.
Lawrence Cameron landed on a flight from Latvia as the attack was unfolding. As he walked through the arrivals area, the horror became clear.
Walked around the corner into the main terminal, and just a sea of people screaming, running, tripping, police with guns drawn. Started taking a few pictures, but then the police started pushing us back, into the back of the terminal, and it quickly became clear that something nasty had happened. This wasn't a drill, this wasn't a hoax or anything like that.
They worked through the night to repair the area, windows shattered, ceilings destroyed by automatic gunfire, and 3 huge blasts. A futile attempt to return to normality. The airport reopened quickly, an attempt to reassure passengers. But this is a profoundly shaken country. Turkey's image once again hit by another deadly attack. And with the wave of bombings across Turkey showing no signs of abating, there will be big questions about how to increase security at the most vulnerable points. The 3 attackers were driven in by taxi, the car not checked as it entered the airport. There were worries it was a soft target. The government says all signs point to the Islamic State group, the latest in a spate of attacks by IS cells here. At the hospital, emotional scenes as families fought between themselves, a desperate search for who was to blame. Others waited for news of loved ones caught up in a situation they still can't comprehend. Among the casualties, Turks and foreigners too, from Saudi Arabia, Jordan, Iran and elsewhere. And the first are now being laid to rest. Passengers, police, airport staff, lives ripped apart in a country that once felt safe. So, Fiona, still no claim of responsibility here, but actually IS has never actually claimed responsibility for any of the attacks in Turkey that it is believed to have committed. But a few clues. Tonight, the director of the CIA says that the attack does indeed bear all the hallmarks of an attack by so-called Islamic State. A recent message by a supposed spokesman of IS called for large-scale attacks during Ramadan, the Muslim holy month, which is now. And yesterday marked 2 years to the day since IS declared its caliphate. Here in Turkey, critics have accused the government of failing to secure the country. But tonight, President Erdogan came out fighting, vowing to eradicate terror. The problem, Fiona, is that fewer and fewer people in this nervous country really believe him.
Mark Leon in Istanbul, thank you. The number of families in temporary housing is at its highest for more than 5 years, with more than 1 million in England and Wales on council housing waiting lists. The latest figures will be announced tomorrow, but housing analysts are warning of a perfect storm of rising rents, benefit cuts and an acute shortage of affordable housing. The government says it has a £5 million fund to help councils under the most pressure. Our UK Affairs correspondent Jeremy Cook has this special report.
Healthcare assistant Natasha and Henry, who's just turned 9. A small family overwhelmed by a giant housing crisis.
We sleep, me and Henry, here on this bed. At the same time, it is our dining table. This is our everything.
This is their home. 2 of them now sharing 4 walls, 1 room, 1 bed, among thousands now in temporary accommodation.
It is disgusting. I'm so depressed.
We first met Natasha when she was facing eviction from her West London flat 6 months ago, a working mum who fell behind on her rent. The council says it's tried to help, but the few places on offer are too expensive or too far away from her job.
I can't sleep because of the situation. How can a human being who is working, earning money, you don't enjoy your life? Why?
She worries for Henry. He worries for his mum.
She went to the doctors and her
high pressure was up, and I got upset because I knew first thing it was this house that made her pressure high.
It may be centred on London, but this is a national housing crisis with soaring rents, benefit cuts, and now more than 1 million people waiting for council houses which simply aren't there.
The response is often crisis management, firefighting, a sticking plaster on the symptoms of a wider housing crisis caused by a lack of housing, and the people who are paying the price are ordinary families.
Where are your shoes, Danny?
Families like Hayley's, stuck in a temporary one-bedroom flat for more than a year with 4 children. The council house waiting list makes grim reading.
I'm not really a priority, and they put me on 514 on the list.
Here, it's 2 rooms for 5 people, and after all this time, the temporary is feeling permanent.
It feels like it's not gonna end.
Hayley, originally from South Africa, was working, but divorce meant eviction, unemployment, and then this place. The council says it is trying to help her, but she has little hope.
It's over a year now. It just feels like there's no hope. I don't feel anybody's helping me. I don't feel that anybody thinks I'm important. My kids.
It is a crisis which will have a profound impact on many young lives as they grow up with no place to call home. Jeremy Cook, BBC News, London.
Now, it's probably a once-in-a-career moment if you are ranked 772nd in the world tennis rankings and you end up playing 17-time Grand Slam winner Roger Federer on Wimbledon's centre court. But Britain's Marcus Willis was undaunted by his clash this afternoon, saying afterwards he'd earned himself a beer. Our sports correspondent Joe Wilson watched the match.
Centre court on Wednesday afternoon. What on earth is Marcus Willis doing here? He's supposed to be back in Warwick. There are people here wanting their tennis lessons. Well, sorry, your coach is taking on Roger Federer, along with his followers in their socks.
Shoes off, if you love Willis, shoes off.
You don't get to world number 772 without having some skills on court, even against the greatest.
This is unbelievable.
But Federer won the first set 6-love. Centre court wanted Willis to do himself justice, and at the start of the second set he won his first game. Greeted as if he'd won the championship at Wimbledon and indeed back in Warwick. If it was Hollywood, Marcus Willis would be played by Bruce.
Well, this is one of those sporting stories of the ordinary man, a triumph of perseverance and possibility. And that's why, when it comes to Marcus Willis, even on the dreariest of days, people will watch and warm to him.
Having lost the second set 6-3, Willis became even more competitive in the third. Federer eventually took that third set 6-4 and so the match, but the experience belonged to Willis.
I was enjoying it out there. If I'm playing well and competing with Roger Federer for a couple of sets, and I'm doing the right things, I've still got a lot to learn and a lot of improving to do, so it's good.
Marcus brought some unbelievable energy to the court with the fans and then with his play as well and with his personality, so it was very, very refreshing.
Well, that compliment may be worth even more to Marcus Willis than the £50,000 he won in defeat. Joe Wilson, BBC News at Wimbledon.
Tomorrow, commemorations will begin to mark the 100th anniversary of a battle that's come to symbolise the horrors of World War I. On the first day alone, nearly 20,000 Allied soldiers were killed, the bloodiest battle in British military history. Over the next 5 months, 1 million were killed or wounded on both sides. Our special correspondent Alan Little reports from northern France on the enduring significance of the Battle of the Somme.
Before July the 1st, 1916, the Somme was simply a river, lovely in its summer fruitfulness. After that date, it became a metaphor that holds our collective imagination to this day. So great, so sudden, so unexpected was the catastrophe that unfolded here. British commanders believed the attack in these fields would end the war. Their men didn't want to be left out of the last big push for victory. Look into their relaxed, even cheerful faces as they gathered that morning, and you see the last moments of a lost innocence about the nature of modern war and what it would do from now on. When they climbed onto exposed open ground, they thought the German guns had been destroyed by a week-long bombardment. They had no idea what was waiting for them. The Germans had thousands of these, the Maxim machine gun. Each could fire 500 rounds a minute. Against this there was no chance, but they went on and on, walking into it, all day. The French would call this gun the lawnmower, the British the devil's paintbrush. The cemeteries of the Somme recall the worst single day in British military history. Days later, the wounded were still calling out from no man's land, and it went on for 5 months more. One who died that first day was Lieutenant Evelyn Lintott, footballer, Queen's Park Rangers and England. His old club has a capacity of 20,000, the number killed on July the 1st alone. Each seat, a life unlived. By November 1916, 1 million had been killed or wounded on all sides, enough to fill this stadium 50 times over. In the poetic and popular imagination, the Somme symbolizes futility, for nothing was gained. Historians challenge that. For Allied commanders learned from this to adapt to warfare in the machine age, and won the war in the end. Today, the Somme is a place of secular pilgrimage. These walkers plan to create a path along the old front line, from the English Channel to the Swiss border, to be called the Via Sacra, the sacred road. For in these fields, those far-off young men who left their bones in the mud of northern France still speak to us powerfully of what Europe has been capable of doing to itself. Alan Little, BBC News, on the Somme.
The 100th anniversary of the Battle of the Somme. Now, Newsnight is coming up over on BBC Two. Here's Evan.
Tonight, we'll ask, how determined is Europe to defend that principle of free movement of people? They say it's a non-negotiable piece of the single market, but is there a chink of flexibility there? Join me now on BBC Two, 11 p.m. in Scotland.
And that's it from me. Here on BBC One, it's time for the news where you are. Bye-bye.